Hello everyone, and welcome back to this next section of the asset creation part of the tutorial. We're going to start texturing the sword that we've made. I hope that, you've all got Substance Painter. You can download the free trial from Adobe or the Substance website to just get you through this section. I highly recommend this tool when making assets for Unreal and for any games engine in general. I also use it for cinematic workflow stuff. So it's a really good tool to use, and it's really powerful for making really high quality textures. The actual program itself is quite cheap. You can get a subscription service to it, which isn't very expensive at all. So yeah, I do highly recommend using this tool to help create textures for your assets. What I will do is go through the use of this program in a much greater depth than I did the modeling section, just because during the modeling section, I assume you'll have some experience with modeling. So it was more about my workflow for getting the asset and what you need to think about when making things for games. Whereas this is going to be more about the program itself and what we need to do here to get things to look awesome. So yeah, just follow along, and we should end up with a really cool looking sword. But what we're going to start with is just setting up the project and then baking the asset, and then I'll talk through what's going on as we make it. So all you want to do is run over to where it says File here in the top left and hit File and New, and then make sure that we're on PBR Metallic Roughness because that's the workflow we'll be using. And then we want to select our low poly mesh and then change the document resolution to 2K. I generally leave it at 2K. Sometimes I scale it up to 4K as we're working just to see what it will look like at 4K, but it's much quicker to work at 2K, so I leave it there for now. And then just hit OK, and we should get our sword. So we've got our sword in, and over in the top right hand side where it says texture set list, you can see it says sword. That's the name of our material. If you were to have multiple materials on the one sword, then you would get them all here, and you could switch between them and texture them individually. But as we're just going to have one material for this sword, it's much cheaper for games that way, then we just keep the one material. And you can move around the viewport by holding Alt and left click to move around like that. Alt middle click does this. And if you Alt and Shift and click, then it will lock it to a direction, and you can navigate it like so. Cool. So what we want to do is go over to where it says layers and then hit texture set settings. Scroll down to where it says bake mesh maps, and this is where we're going to bake the high poly to the low poly. You can leave the output size at 512. That's the size that is going to bake the texture set. Leave it low for now so that we can iterate on it quickly, because I can already see there's a few things in the mesh that we're going to need to fix. So let's leave it at a low resolution, bake it, assess, and then address what we need to fix to get the better bake. Because at this stage, what you're trying to do is get the best bake possible, and that will set you up to be able to create the best textures for it, really, because the bake is what drives a lot of it, and it's what makes the asset look like it's higher poly than it is. So we need to get that perfect, and then we'll go from there. Okay, cool. So now we've done that. These things on the side here, you don't need to worry about just yet, but they're basically all the different maps that we're going to be baking, and they help drive the masks in Substance Painter. You can turn off ID because we're not actually baking an ID map. The ID maps are really useful when you've got a material sat on top of another mesh that you want to bake to itself, so that you won't need to like paint in where the other material is. But as our meshes are all split up quite obviously, we don't need to bake an ID, so that'll be fine. If you just make sure you're on common here, and then press high definition meshes and sword high, and then you want to scroll down to where it says match, and then you put match by mesh name there, and that's what will bake the blade with the blade, or the grip with the grip. And then one silly thing that I did was I put uppercases here, so you're going to want to change all of these to lowercase. You're going to want to change all of these to uppercase, unless you didn't do that part in Maya, and then you can leave them as was. But I put an uppercase L and an uppercase high for high and low, which was silly, but it's done. And you can change it quite easily. You could change this to whatever you'd like, so that's a good thing to show you, I guess. And then once you've done that and all that set up, you just need to hit bake sword, and it will bake our mesh. Okay, cool. So one thing I noticed when loading the meshes was that the file size for the high poly was too small. So I think at some point Maya didn't export the smoothed mesh smoothed. So we're going to need to go into Maya and just apply a smooth modifier and then export it out. But there are some other things that I've noticed too. So the hard edges on this sword are creating these shears that we don't want. These angles are not 90 degrees or really that extreme at all. So we could smooth those out and that'll be fine. We've also got a hard edge here that's causing that shear. There's another one here. That one maybe we could smooth out as well. They're on the other side too. So we're going to want to go in and fix those. There's also an issue with the overlapping. Let me change the size of my brush here. There's an issue with the overlapping here. So these are all baking onto each other. And we can fix that by breaking them apart just like we did before and naming them the same thing. So I think what we'll do is we'll break all of the ones this direction and then break all the ones that direction and then break all of these off and have them as their own meshes, and then they'll bake better. I'm even thinking maybe just because we're going to get quite close to this, it might be quite nice to see, like we can add some nice cinematic moments where we zoom down the sword. It might be quite nice to bevel these edges just so that it matches the high poly a bit better. And then we get some nice, it will make the leather look nice and soft and smooth. So I think there are some things that we're going to do. So let's switch back to Maya and apply those changes. And then we'll come back here and do it again. It's very rare that you'll come into Substance, bake for the first time and have nothing to fix. And if you manage it, well done. But it's always good to bake it, see the things that you want to change to get a better bake, and then go from there. But also remember that this is a really low quality bake because we've got it set down to 512 without any anti-aliasing. So yeah, it's good to see from here, but it's impossible to tell everything. But those are the main things I think we should fix for now. So let's go jump over to Maya and fix those first. Okay, so now we're back in Maya. We can start to fix some of those issues that we had. So I'll go through quickly by just smoothing the smoothing groups out on the areas of the blade that we don't need to be hard, because the bake will make those hard for us. And then all of the ones on this part of the geometry. So it's a constant balancing act really between which parts you want the geometry to handle and which parts you're wanting the normal map to handle. Generally, if anything's too extreme, you want the geometry to handle it, as the normal map will cause some gradients and stuff, which won't look great in the engine, and the mesh might look a little bit blobby, which is what you don't want. So those ones are fixed. The next ones we can fix are, I think what we should do is bevel these edges just to give it a bit more softness, as we're going to have some closer shots, something like this, which would be cool. So we're just going to bevel all of these edges, and you can do that again by, oh, we can't select them through here anymore, can we? Although, yes, we can. That's maybe a quicker way to do it. Let's just select all of these edges. Through here, find the rest of them. Try not to select any of the vertical ones. Okay, and now we've got them selected. You can just bevel them just once. And we're just doing it so that, yeah, we'll be able to smooth them out and bake them nice and soft, which is what we want ideally. So once that's done, let's just smooth those geometries out. There we go. We should end up with something much softer, which is nice, and that'll bake much better. And then we need to split off these sections so that we can bake them individually. And let's attach those first. We're going to also need to do this in the high poly too, just so we can get them to bake to each other. And then we'll split off one section of crosses and attach those. Cool. So what did we call these? We called them wrap. So what we can do now is just delete that group and call them, add them back to the low poly group and call them wrap 1 underscore low. And call that one wrap 2. And then that one wrap 3. Perfect. So now we just need to do the exact same thing to the high poly, just the part that we did here we need to do. So if we find the wrap, you can split that up. So let's take off these sections first. Attach them together. And then do the same again for these sections. Cool. Let's get those back into the group. And now we need to make sure that they're just exactly the same. So wrap 1 is this one here. Wrap 3 is that one. And then this one's wrap 2. Perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do now as well, if we save this, we're going to smooth all of this mesh and export it to the high. That'll take a few seconds, and then let's do the same for the low poly. Great. So what we should be able to do now is just move straight back to Substance Painter and rebake them. Okay, cool. Now we're back in Substance Painter. What we want to do is bring in the new mesh. So we go back to Project Configuration, Sword Low, and then bring that in. And then everything will look weird for a moment, but we need to just rebake it, and then we should get what we need. So let's just refresh the high poly as well. And you can see now that the file size has changed, so that was definitely the high poly this time. I'm not quite sure what happened last time, but that's fine. And then we just want to make sure everything's correct, and then say bake sort. And then hopefully, I think I must have named one of these incorrectly, but then also what we've got here is an issue with some of the geometry sticking through. So let's go back and fix that as well. And then we'll just double check on these and make sure that we name them correctly. Okay, so I can see what the issue is with this one. Let's hide the base model. And in the low poly, this needs to sit a little bit further in. It's just a bit too far away. And let's do that one as well. Perfect. And then for these guys, we just need to make sure that they're all named correctly, really. So that's wrap 2. So I got that wrong. So let's name this one in high poly wrap 3. Then wrap 3 is probably wrap 2. Yeah, perfect. And then wrap 1 is wrap 1. And then what we also need to do, completely forgot to do this part, is to just make sure those UVs are relaxed. And it's a bit better. And then we're going to need to repack these UVs just to make sure. Or, yeah, let's repack them. Just to make sure that they fit in the spaces properly and we won't get any issues. It's better to just pack them now. And then they'll definitely be 100% right. So just waiting for that to finish running, and then we'll need to just smooth the high poly and export that again. And then we should be, fingers crossed, it should be perfect at that point. But yeah, as I say, it's very rare that you'll come to bring a model straight into Substance Painter and not have to do any work when fixing it for the bake. So this is a good exercise really in just finding out what things it is that you're going to need to change to get the best possible bake. Okay, cool. Export that one as the low. And then the high poly. And then head back over to Substance. Okay, now if we bake it again. Perfect. Okay, that's worked out a lot better now. So what we're going to want to do is just bake it on a higher setting. Yep, that's working a lot better. It's not any issues. Maybe if we have a look at what the will look like with a slightly larger cage. Cool. Okay, so now what we want to do is just bake that on a much higher setting, hit 4K, add some anti-aliasing, maybe go to 4 times if you want to, and then just press bake sword. And this is going to take a little while, so I'm going to press the button and then we can jump to the next part once it's baked.